I was still brushing the crumbs off my nightgown when I saw it, the tall ficus tree sitting square in the window where I used to greet the morning light. They said it brightened up the room. I suppose I didn't. If you've ever felt like you simply faded from view, like the world rearranged itself without checking if you were still standing there, stay. Sit with me a while. Maybe leave a comment if you wish. It's like sharing a cup of tea with someone who still sees you. Some mornings are quiet by design, others because no one thought to speak your name. Let me tell you how it happened. Not loudly, not bitterly, just honestly. One slow breath at a time. My name is Margaret. I'm 73. For the last 3 years, I've lived in the downstairs guest room of my son's house, the one facing east. It catches the morning sun before the rest of the house wakes up, and until recently, it was my favorite place in the world. There's a window there, tall with pale wooden frames, a little chipped at the corners. I used to sit by it every morning in my housecoat, with a cup of Earl Grey and a sliver of dry toast, watching the world unfold, the neighbor's dog waddling out with that ridiculous pink bow on its head, the teenager across the street always late for school, the mail truck turning precisely at 9:15. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I never asked for much in this stage of life, just a place to feel still, a window to the world, and the small mercy of morning light across my lap. Last Wednesday, they put a plant there, a large one, a ficus, I think, broad leaves that soak up light like it belongs to them. My chair had been moved, not far, just enough that I could no longer see the street, or the sun, or the day beginning. I asked about it. Gently, of course. I always speak gently now. My daughter-in-law smiled. "It makes the space feel more alive," she said. My son didn't look up from his phone. I nodded, said nothing, went back to my room. It's strange how small losses ache more with age. When you're young, you expect to be shoved aside now and then. You make room for others, for change. But at 73, you start running out of things that are yours. A favorite mug disappears. The music is always someone else's playlist. And then one day, even the light that warmed your knees belongs to a potted plant. That evening, I tried to sit in the old chair anyway, just to see. The plant brushed against my cheek when I leaned forward. Dust stuck to my sweater. I couldn't see the street at all. The next morning, I stayed in bed longer, not because I was tired, I rarely sleep past 5, but because there was nowhere calling me, no place to belong. The room felt dimmer, or maybe I did. Sometimes I think I should say something. Not about the window, but about everything, about how I feel like I'm drifting around the edges of my own family. But then I remember the way my son sighs when I ask him to repeat something, or how the grandchildren look through me when they're on their phones. I don't want to be a burden. God knows I spent my whole life trying not to be. So instead, I pour my tea in silence. I listen to the morning without seeing it, and I wonder if anyone has noticed that I haven't sat by the window in days. Tomorrow, maybe I'll open it a crack, just enough to feel the air again, or maybe I'll wait and tell you more. I wasn't always invisible. Once, I was the center of gravity in our house, the quiet anchor to which all winds returned. My hands had purpose then. They stirred, folded, tied shoelaces, held cheeks fevered from schoolyard colds. They wiped tears and pressed shirts, packed sandwiches and smoothed back cowlicks with spit and love. For 42 years, I was a wife. 37 of them spent in the same modest home at the corner of River Birch Lane and Cedar. It had peeling shutters, a sun-warmed porch, and a garden where the daisies refused to quit. There I became a mother, then a caretaker, then just, tired. My husband, Walter, was a mechanic, not a talkative man, but steady. He rose every morning at 6, drank coffee so black it looked like motor oil, and left a faint scent of grease and aftershave wherever he went. We loved each other in the quiet, enduring way some people do, without grand declarations or anniversary trips, just a full gas tank and a bowl of warm soup waiting after a long day. He passed in 2013. Heart attack. Quick. In his favorite chair. After that, the house felt too wide, too quiet. I tried to stay busy, joining church socials, knitting for the hospital, rereading old cookbooks just for the margin notes I'd scribbled decades earlier. Michael hates carrots, use peas. Michael, my son, my only child. He was always a kind boy, if a little serious. Took after Walter in that way. Even as a child, he was cautious, stacking his Legos with exact alignment, asking before touching anything at a neighbor's. I poured everything into him. His lunches were always warm, even when I had to drive them up to the school. I ironed every shirt through high school, waited up through college all-nighters just to hand him a hot drink at 2 a.m. when he stumbled bleary-eyed from his room. He married Rachel the spring after his residency. A lovely wedding, white lilacs and pale blue ribbon. I still remember the scent, sweet and sharp, like it was blooming under my nose. They bought a house with 5 bedrooms. Rachel had dreams of hosting, entertaining. I told myself I was happy he had her, that I could let go now. But then Rachel got pregnant, and suddenly there were diapers to change again. Laundry, crumbs. I moved in, just to help for a while. That was 8 years ago. Somehow I became part of the furniture, familiar, functional, quietly enduring. No one asked if I was still mourning Walter, or if my knees ached on the stairs, or how it felt to share a house but not a life. They let me take over the laundry, the dishes, the early mornings with the baby when they were too tired to move. I was grateful to be useful, grateful to hold that warm, squirming bundle to my chest and remember what love used to feel like. I learned their rhythms, what brand of coffee they preferred, the towels folded just so. I kept the pantry stocked and the fridge tidy, made myself small where needed and invisible where not. Sometimes Rachel would say, "We're so lucky to have you," with a kiss on the cheek as she rushed out the door. And I'd nod, smile, and finish folding her laundry. But the truth is, being useful is not the same as being wanted. Some days, I wonder what would happen if I disappeared. Would they notice? Would the fridge go empty? Would the towels pile up and the bread mold over? Or would they simply sigh, grateful for more space? I don't resent them. Truly, I don't. I chose this. I said yes, over and over again. But choices made out of love don't always end in dignity. And now, with the ficus standing proud where I once watched the dawn, I wonder if I've been slowly, gently erased. Not out of cruelty, but out of convenience. I catch myself sometimes looking at my hands, the same hands that once soothed, scraped knees and held trembling chins during heartbreaks. Now they fold fitted sheets in silence. Still. Always still. Tomorrow, maybe I'll take a walk to the end of the street, where the sidewalk cracks near the old mailbox. I used to walk there with Walter, just to stretch our legs and talk about nothing. Maybe that memory's still waiting there, like a stone I tucked into the grass. Maybe I just need to find it again. Or maybe, I need to find me. It wasn't a fight. There were no raised voices, no slammed doors, not even a sigh too loud. Just a moment. A small, quiet moment, but it cut deeper than any word ever could. It was Sunday, pancake morning. I'd been making pancakes every Sunday since Michael was 6. Back then, he liked them shaped like dinosaurs or the moon. As he grew older, he wanted them plain. "Just circles, Mom." And even now, all these years later, I still made them. Light, golden, thin at the edges, just the way he liked. Rachel preferred yogurt now, something about gut health. The children, Lucas and Clara, liked chocolate chips and whipped cream. I made them all. I was already up when the sun hadn't yet colored the sky. I always am. It's easier, I've found, to greet the day before anyone else can ignore you in it. I stood at the stove, flipping the last batch when I heard footsteps behind me. "Good morning, Grandma," Lucas said, brushing past on his way to the fridge. He's 9 now, still sweet, in a distracted sort of way. "Morning, love," I smiled, setting the stack of warm pancakes on the table. A few minutes later, they all gathered, Rachel in her joggers, Michael in his reading glasses, Clara dragging her stuffed unicorn. I poured juice. I fetched more syrup. I brought out the warm dish of berries, just like last week. And then, Rachel said it. As she looked at the table, her eyes landed on the familiar blue china I always used on Sundays. Plates I had bought decades ago when I wanted to make meals feel a little more special. A little more us. "Oh," she said lightly, "could we maybe use the white set instead? The blue ones feel kind of old-fashioned." She didn't mean harm, I know that. It was just a thought, a preference. But the words landed differently. Old-fashioned. Like doilies and typewriters, like rotary phones and rusted biscuit tins. Like me. Michael didn't say anything. He just reached up and grabbed the white plates from the shelf, handing them to Rachel as if it were the most natural thing in the world to do. I stood there, dish towel in hand, watching my blue plates disappear. The same ones that held hundreds of Sunday breakfasts, birthday pancakes, and I'm sorry waffles. No one noticed I hadn't sat down. I simply kept moving, washing the pan, wiping the counter, folding the towel over the oven handle. At one point, Clara asked, "Grandma, do you want one?" Rachel answered for me. "She already ate, sweetheart." I hadn't, but it didn't matter. By then, it felt like the chair at the table no longer belonged to me. Maybe it hadn't for a while. After they left the table, off to soccer practice, errands, birthday parties, I sat alone and ate one of the leftover pancakes cold, standing at the counter. The blue plate sat in the sink, a smudge of syrup still clinging to the rim. That evening, I packed the whole set away, wrapped each one in old newspaper, gently, like I was putting something to rest. I left the box in the garage, labeled in careful cursive, "Margaret's Sunday Dishes." I didn't tell anyone. Why would I? They hadn't meant to hurt me. That's the thing about small cuts, no one sees the blood but you. It's not just about plates, of course. It never is. It's the way people begin to edit the world around you, trimming off the edges where you used to fit, making room for their own rhythm, their own taste, until you realize there's no space left for the things that once made you feel like home. That night, I sat by the cold window, the ficus still towering, and thought about how quiet erasure can be. A change of plates, a moved chair, a forgotten question. Nothing cruel, nothing loud, just less of me each day. Tomorrow, maybe I'll take out my old journal. I haven't written in years, but I used to be quite good with words. Walter always said my letters were better than Hallmark. Maybe I'll write something no one else will read, just to remember how it feels to still have a voice. It was a Tuesday. Just a Tuesday. Nothing grand happened. No thunderclap, no dramatic exit, but it was the day I quietly ceased to be part of the family. And the saddest thing? I don't think anyone noticed. The house was busy that morning. Rachel was on a work call, pacing barefoot across the hardwood with her coffee in hand. Michael was late for something. I don't even know what anymore. We've reached the stage where he doesn't explain, and I've stopped asking. The children were bickering upstairs, the kind of tired, familiar squabbling that used to exhaust me when I was the one solving every little crisis. I stood at the edge of it all. Unnecessary. A misplaced piece from an old jigsaw puzzle that no longer fits the picture. I had folded the laundry early, hoping to help. Everyone likes fresh sheets, right? I'd even taken the liberty of tidying up Rachel's home office, just wiping down the desk and organizing the charging cables. Nothing intrusive, or so I thought. That afternoon, she came down the stairs slowly. I was making tea. The good kind. Earl Grey with a splash of milk and 1 sugar cube. I always make enough for 2, though it's been months since anyone's accepted a cup. She cleared her throat. "Margaret, do you mind if we talk for a sec?" It's always, "Do you mind?" as if the conversation is already your fault. I smiled, tried to still my hands. "Of course." She leaned against the counter, folded her arms. Not angry, just, distant? Like I was someone else's mother. "I appreciate how much you help around the house," she began. I braced. "But I'd like to ask that you not go through my office anymore. It's my space, and it just feels like a boundary thing. A boundary, that word again. I nodded, immediately apologizing, perhaps too quickly. I didn't mean to overstep. I was just trying to help. The coffee cup rings and the sticky notes were curling, I thought. She smiled politely, cutting me off with kindness. I know, but it's just better this way. Better. I didn't finish my tea. I poured both cups down the drain. The scent of bergamot clung to the air like a memory you didn't ask for. That evening, they had dinner without me. Not cruelly, just forgot. I'd taken a short walk after sunset, a habit I'd started the week the plant went up in the window. When I returned, the table was full of empty plates and laughter, dishes already rinsed, the dishwasher humming. I stood there in the foyer, unsure if I should make a sound or simply pass through like a shadow. No one turned. No one said, "We waited for you." No one asked, "Where were you?" No one noticed I hadn't eaten. So I went to my room, took off my shoes, and lay down with the lights off. There's something deeply humbling about realizing your presence doesn't alter the room, that whether you're there or not, the meal happens, the laughter carries on, the world spins unbothered. I stared at the ceiling, remembered nights when Michael was small and wouldn't go to bed unless I sat on the floor beside him, just humming. No words, just the sound of me, breathing near. Now I'm the one lying in the dark, waiting for the soft comfort of another's nearness. But silence answered, and in that silence, something settled inside me. Not anger, not even sadness, really. Just understanding, a deep, low knowledge that I was no longer part of their we, that my chapter in this house had ended, even if no one thought to close the book. Tomorrow I'll do the laundry, as usual, but I think I'll start folding less, maybe just my own things. Maybe that's enough. Maybe it's time I remembered how to live in a world of I. I sat at the mirror the next morning, not to put on makeup, but to look, really look. The face that stared back was mine. Yes, but quieter, like someone who'd been waiting on the edge of herself for too long. I used to know this woman. She had a laugh that shook her shoulders, hands that smelled like rosemary and flower, and a spine that straightened when life threw down its worst. She used to sing while sweeping, used to hum when cooking, used to keep a lipstick in every purse. Just in case, she'd say. A moment calls for color. But now there are days I barely speak aloud. Sometimes, when I pass by the hall mirror, I startle, as if I've seen someone else. I picked up a brush and ran it through my hair slowly. Each stroke reminded me of something I used to do for someone else. My husband before a job interview. Michael before his first school picture. Clara last summer when she cried over a knot she couldn't untangle. So many little acts, small kindnesses that filled a life. I never resented being needed. I built my identity around it. But somewhere along the way, the lines blurred. Being helpful became being invisible. Being present became being convenient. Being silent became being forgotten. It wasn't just the house, it was me. I stopped buying the teas I liked because no one else drank them. Stopped knitting because no one noticed if I did. Stopped leaving the house for walks because someone might ask where I was going. Not with concern, but confusion. I had become a ghost with chores. One morning, not long ago, I'd set a pie to cool on the windowsill. Something I hadn't done in years. A cherry pie from scratch, just like Walter used to love. It was silly, I suppose. A whim, a gesture to remind myself that I could still create sweetness. Rachel came home early that day and opened the window wider. "Oh," she said casually. "Just trying to air the kitchen out. It smells like sugar in here." And then she lit one of her eucalyptus candles. I watched the smoke curl through the air, swallowing the scent of something I'd poured myself into. That was the day I stopped baking. It's a strange thing, losing yourself not through tragedy, but through 1,000 little dismissals. There was no single cruel word, no act of betrayal, just time, and the slow wearing down of a person not cared for. I walked through the house yesterday, touching things I hadn't looked at in ages. My wedding ring, still resting in the porcelain dish by my bed. A photo of Walter with grease on his cheek and that crooked grin. A yellowed postcard from Michael when he studied abroad. Miss you, Mom. Tell Dad I'm eating well. And finally, the journal. I hadn't written in it since the year after Walter died, but I opened it anyway. The first entry I found was dated November 2nd, 2014. It said, "Today I fixed the furnace by myself. Cried afterward, not from sadness, from proof that I still could. I read it 3 times. Proof that I still could. It stayed with me all day. Echoed in the places where I had long been too quiet. That evening, as the house settled and the dishwasher ran its second cycle, I pulled the journal to my lap again and wrote for the first time in years. I think I'm still here, buried somewhere between silence and syrup, between folded towels and Sunday mornings that no longer want me. But I am still here, and I want to find myself again before the world forgets how to look for me. Tomorrow I might go into town, alone. There's a coffee shop on Maple where they still know me as Margaret, not Grandma, not Mom, not Rachel's mother-in-law. Just Margaret. The woman who likes her toast burnt and her tea strong. Maybe that's where I'll start, with burnt toast. And the quiet decision to remember the woman I was before I gave her all away. I didn't pack much. Just a few blouses, my softest cardigan, a brush, the journal, and one photo. The one where Walter and I are standing in front of our first house, laughing like fools because the sold sign tipped over and hit him in the shin. I remember that laugh. I haven't heard it in years. I left early, just after dawn. The house was still asleep. I moved softly, not out of fear, but reverence, as if I were leaving a chapel where prayers once lived. I didn't write a note. What would I even say? I love you, but I can't keep shrinking just to fit the corners you leave me. No, I just left the laundry basket folded at the foot of the stairs, full and neat. It felt like a quiet goodbye in itself. I walked to the end of the street with my small rolling suitcase humming behind me. At the corner, I paused. That old oak tree still stood there, the one that had once held Michael's tire swing. For a moment, I heard it creak in the wind like it used to, when he was 7 and fearless. And then I turned away. I didn't have a plan. Not really. But I had saved just enough from my widow's benefits and years of quietly saying no to myself. Enough for something small, modest, mine. I'd remembered an ad I'd once seen at the post office. A room for rent above a florist's shop in the next town over. Ideal for quiet living, it had said. That sounded just about right. I called the number a week ago. Her name was Grace, which felt like a sign. She met me at the station in a pea green sweater and hair like steel wool. "You must be Margaret," she said, smiling without judgment, like a woman who's known her share of departures. The room was simple. A bed, a window that faces west, a kettle. It smelled like lavender and old paperbacks. I wept quietly that night. Not from sadness, but relief. No one knocked. No one asked where I'd been. I watched the sun set instead of rise, and it felt like a kind of rebirth. The next morning, I made tea in silence and stood by the window. No ficus in sight. Just sky. And I whispered to myself, "You're allowed to begin again." Grace offered me a part-time job helping in the shop downstairs. I told her I hadn't arranged flowers since my own wedding. She smiled. "Good. That means you remember the feeling." By the end of the week, my hands smelled like eucalyptus and ranunculus. I found that I liked wrapping stems in brown paper and tying them with ribbon. Something about sending beauty out into the world again made my chest lift. I still folded towels at night, old habits, but now they were my own. I bought a new mug, yellow with a chip in the rim. I chose it deliberately. Imperfect things are honest. I started writing again. Not just in the journal, but little poems, stories, bits of memory I didn't want to lose. Grace lets me pin them to the corkboard behind the counter. One man, older, kind eyes, read one about bread pudding and said, "My wife used to make that." I smiled. Mine too, I lied, just to let the moment bloom. Some days I miss them. Michael's voice, Lucas's small hands, the scent of Sunday pancakes. But longing is not the same as regret. I would still choose this space, this air. I haven't told them where I am, not yet, not out of spite. I don't believe in punishing people with absence, but because I'm still remembering how to be a person, not a placeholder. If they ever ask, truly ask, I will answer, but only then. Tomorrow, Grace said she'll teach me how to make a bouquet. That looks like spring even in winter. And I thought, maybe that's what I am now. A quiet arrangement, unexpected, alive, even after everything. It's strange how a life can quietly begin again, not with a bang, not with a grand gesture, but with small, almost invisible joys that slowly take root, like time between cobblestones. I wake up before the sun still, but now I let the silence stretch. There's no laundry to fold, no footsteps to chase. Just me, the rustle of morning air, and the warmth of tea in a mug that's finally mine. The window in this little room faces west. In the evenings, the light pours in like honey. I pull a chair close and sit barefoot, knees up, journal open across my lap. I write without fear now, not for anyone to read, not to prove anything, just to speak again in my own voice. I never realized how long I'd been silent, not just in words, but in will, in wants. Now I write down what I like. Strong tea, linen that smells like wind, the weight of a book in hand, the way ranunculus petals spiral inward like they're keeping a secret. Grace lets me tend the front window of the flower shop. She says I have a knack for arranging. I didn't know that about myself. But each time I place a vase just so, tuck a sprig of lavender next to something yellow and brave, I feel a small pulse of pride, like I've added something beautiful to the world again. Customers come and go. Most don't notice me, but a few do. There's a woman with arthritic hands who comes every Friday. She buys a single rose, always red. She never says who it's for. I never ask. We just exchange quiet smiles. She sees me, and I see her, and that's enough. And then there's Mr. Alden. He's quiet like me. Widower. Comes in for lilies, always white. They were her favorite, he told me once, but she hated the smell. We both laughed at that. Not loudly, but like people who have survived long sadnesses and come out soft instead of hard. He offered to walk me home once. I said yes. We didn't talk much, just listened to our feet on the pavement and the breeze through late autumn leaves. At my door, he tipped his cap. Yes, he still wears one. And said, "Thank you for letting me remember her," out loud. I nodded, touched his sleeve. "Thank you for seeing me," I said. That night, I slept with the window open. There's no great adventure waiting for me, no second youth. But I don't need that. I have my name again, my breath, my time. I bought a small radio last week, plays only classical and soft jazz. Every morning, I let it hum in the background while I water the shop's begonias. It makes the place feel like it's listening back. Sometimes I imagine Clara walking past the shop. That maybe she'll see the window, the flowers, the soft colors. That she'll say, this looks like something Grandma would have loved. And maybe that will be true. I don't dream of going back, but I do hope they're well. I still wear the locket Walter gave me, the one with nothing inside. He said it was for holding the invisible things. Now I understand what he meant. Tomorrow, Mr. Alden and I will attend a small music recital at the community center. Just piano and cello. He says he likes the way cello makes the room feel wider. I think he's right. So does my heart. And somewhere in that space, I'm beginning to bloom again. Not loudly, not all at once, but enough. Enough to feel the sun again on a life I thought had gone dim. It was early spring when it arrived, a plain white envelope, no return address tucked beneath the flower shop door before we opened. Grace found it, smudged with dew. For Margaret, it said, in handwriting I knew. Michael's. My hand shook as I opened it, not from fear, but from a quiet tremble that comes when something long held inside is about to breathe. Inside was a single page. His writing was neater than I remembered. Slower, maybe. Mom, I don't know if this will reach you. I don't even know if you want it to. Rachel found your journal. You must have left it by accident. I read parts of it. I shouldn't have, but I did. And I want to say, I'm sorry for not seeing you, for letting you fade beside us. You gave so much, and I treated that like furniture, like breath. Always there, always quiet. Clara asked yesterday why you stopped sending her postcards. I didn't have an answer. She cried. Lucas, too. They miss you. I miss you. If you ever want to come home, or even just write back, well, please, we'll do it differently. I promise. Love, Michael. I read it 3 times, then a 4th. Grace didn't say anything. She simply handed me a cup of tea, then left the room. The truth is, I cried, not loudly, not messily, just quiet tears that soaked into my collar, because I'd waited so long, not for an apology, but for recognition, for someone to say, you mattered. You were not just useful, you were loved, and now that it had come, I didn't know what to do with it. I folded the letter and placed it in my journal between the page about the Sunday dishes and the entry about burnt toast. Let it live with the rest of me. That afternoon, I stood by the front window, the one I always dress with fresh flowers. Today, I chose freesia and small bluebells, gentle, hopeful things. In the center, I placed a card, thinking of you, always. I don't know if Michael will ever walk past it, but if he does, I hope he knows it's for him. I didn't write back, not yet. Some wounds need air, others time. But I did buy a pack of postcards, blank, with small watercolor paintings. One had a little bird on a fence post. That one reminded me of Clara. I wrote her name at the top and smiled. Not a big smile, just the kind that lives quietly at the edge of something healing. Later that night, I sat at the window and watched the sun dip behind the roofs. I thought of all the windows I had sat behind, all the mornings I had watched, waited, hoped. This one is mine now. And though the ficus still stands tall somewhere far away, blocking a view I once loved, here the light comes in just fine. I'm not bitter, truly, I'm not. I still love them, fiercely, softly. But I love me now too. If they call, I'll answer. If they knock, I'll open the door. But I will not leave myself behind again to be let in. Tomorrow, I'll write a letter. Maybe not to them. Maybe just to me. Something simple. Like, you're still here, Margaret. You made it. You are not invisible. You are the light through your own window, and that, I think, is enough.